So once again, thank you all for joining our town hall. We are the UC Cohort, an undocumented student collective working under the UCLA Labor Center as part of the National Dream Summer Fellowship. The idea to create the UC Cohort came from this year being the 10th anniversary of the Dream Summer Fellowship program, and to honor and continue the work previous Dream Summer Fellows have done towards advancing the immigration reform agenda. This year, we have committed to tackling both the inequities within the University of California and also the failure of Congress to stand up for an inclusive immigration reform.
The need for inclusive immigration reform has always existed. However, in the past couple of decades, we have seen presidents from both political parties actively harming our communities. For example, the Secure Communities program, the Obama administration launched various immigration raids and deported about 3 million people. His message about deportations was that he was deporting felons and not families, without realizing the damage he was doing to the families he deemed as felons. In fact, most of the deportees only had immigration offenses. In 2012, the DACA program was approved, but only after many years of hard work and organizing by immigrant youth who put their lives on the line for immigration reform.
And in the next administration, Trump's presidential campaign and immigration agenda was centered on anti-immigrant policies and rhetoric. Trump often used immigrants as scapegoats for the challenges the country faced. He continuously talked about building a wall and imposed racist travel bans which affected the resettlement of refugees. The damage did not stop there, however. Families were approached at the border and the administration ordered to have migrant children separated from their parents. The kids were then put into detention centers away from the family in horrific and inhumane conditions. Trump then refocused his efforts to terminating the DACA program, but was later found unsuccessful. But the DACA program itself was implemented to give relief to individuals who came to this country as children in the form of deportation protections and a 2-year work permit. On July 16th, a federal judge in Texas blocked DHS from approving any more initial DACA applications. While this news highlighted how vulnerable the program and its recipients are, it also left out a key fact. The vast majority of immigrant population does not qualify for DACA. Out of the almost 11 million undocumented immigrants in the US, only about 616,000 of them are DACA recipients as of March 31st. That is only approximately 5.6% of the immigrant population.
Currently, the Senate is working on immigration reform, which will try to pass through a process called budget reconciliation. One of the biggest proponents of this has been California Senator Alex Padilla. While Senator Padilla was unable to join us for this town hall, he did send us a video to share with you all today.
Hi, I'm Senator Alex Padilla, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Now, I have the honor of representing California in the United States Senate, and I'm proud to be the first Latino to do so. I'm inspired to see that so many of you are taking it upon yourselves to become leaders and advocates for immigrant justice. As a proud son of immigrants from Mexico, the subject of immigration reform is personal to me. I know firsthand the value that immigrants bring to this country. I'm here because of my parents' many years of hard work and the values they instilled in me of getting a good education and serving others. But I'm also here because of my family's good fortune. Too many immigrants across the country with the same values and drive as my mom and dad are left to struggle against the arbitrary and unfair rules of our current immigration system. Too many have waited for years as immigration reforms are proposed and tabled. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, immigrants have disproportionately served as essential workers in frontline jobs, from doctors and sanitation workers to delivery drivers and farm workers. Everyday immigrants are putting their own health and their family's health on the line to keep America running. That's why I'm committed to passing immigration reform and passing it now through budget reconciliation. Congress has repeatedly failed to pass a permanent solution to create pathways to citizenship for dreamers, farm workers, TPS holders, and other long-term residents of our communities. It's time for us to change that. Right now, Democrats have the ability to deliver the stability and security that immigrant families have earned. Using the budget reconciliation process to provide this relief just makes sense. After all, by expanding pathways to citizenship, we will grow our economy and improve workplaces for everyone. That's precisely the purpose of the infrastructure investments that we're developing in the budget reconciliation bill. Citizenship is a life changer for immigrant families. For many, it's the gateway to a driver's license, or to health care, to higher education, and much more. Citizenship is also the foundation that enables immigrant families to pursue their American dreams. A few weeks ago, I was able to meet with President Biden and Vice President Harris to discuss the need for immigration reform. And I'm thankful for their unequivocal support for including immigration reforms in the budget reconciliation process. As Congress continues to work, it's important to let your senators know where you stand. You all are powerful advocates in the fight to secure a just future for all. Thank you for your dedication and advocacy, and thanks to Dream Summer for hosting this conversation.
This is why exactly we wanted to have this town hall, to focus on the voices of immigrants that are often omitted from the larger narrative and have been impacted by the lack of holistic immigration reform. It is time to demand a legislative action that will give permanent protection to the millions of immigrants who have been living in political limbo.
So this afternoon, we have the honor to introduce our phenomenal panelists who are immigrant youth leaders and activists who are creating a valuable impact in our community. So our panelists will include Alondra Avalos, Jeffrey Umania, Anthony Nong, and Veronica Arroyo. They will be speaking about the immigration reform that is said to be included in the Senate's budget reconciliation package and how they will be directly impacted by it.
Our first panelist is Alondra Avalos. Avalos is a fourth-year student at UCLA who is currently double majoring in labor studies and sociology. Alondra is the current UC Rep for Ideas, which is a UCLA Undocumented Student Organization, and is the chair of the UC Undocumented Student Coalition. Hello, Alondra. Thank you for joining us today. And our next panelist is Jeffrey Umana. Umana is a second year at UCLA who's double majoring in political science and labor studies. Jeffrey currently serves as an internal representative for Ideas and is a Dream Summer Fellow. Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you for joining us today.
Our next panelist is Anthony Nong. Anthony is the Dream Resource Center Director at the UCLA Labor Center. Say hello, Anthony. And then our final panelist is Veronica, and she is a member of the Garment Worker Resource Center. Veronica, would you like to say hello? Okay, well, looks like Veronica's audio is just about to work. Cool. But thank you all for joining us as panelists today, and we appreciate what you all do for the immigrant community and for being willing to share your own thoughts and experiences. We will now begin the Q&A portion of our town hall. We have prepared a short list of questions, some of which are more policy focused and others are more focused on the experiences of the directly impacted. Afterwards, if time permits, we will open up to audience questions, and you can place your questions in the question chat box and use the general chat box to show some love to our panelists. But our first question is directed towards Anthony. So Anthony, would you like to explain to our viewers what the budget reconciliation package is and its importance to immigration reform?
Thanks, Carlos, for that question. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us in today's town hall. So as Carlos mentioned, the question that's in front of me is to explain to you all what the budget reconciliation package is and the importance of it to immigration reform. So the budget reconciliation process is a special Senate procedure that was first used in the 1980s. It allows a bill to be brought up to a vote and passed with a simple majority. The key requirement for this process is that the proposal must affect the federal spending and revenue. The final bill must reduce or increase the federal deficit by no less or no more than the amount specified in the resolution. And as you know, the filibuster creates a barrier for legislation to be discussed and voted on in the Senate, as it creates a 60 vote threshold. The budget reconciliation process provides an opportunity for immigration legislation to be included. Due to the tireless advocacy and organizing of the immigrant rights movement, the Senate recently passed a 3.5 trillion budget resolution that instructs various committees to draft legislative language regarding the various human infrastructure priorities of the Senate Democrats and the Biden administration. Included in this budget resolution was allocation to the Senate Judiciary Committee of $107 billion for lawful permanent status for qualified immigrants and border security. Right now, we know that the framework being proposed on immigration includes DACA recipients, immigrant youth, TPS holders, essential workers, and farm workers. The hope is that the policy language will cover as many people as possible, and we know that we must continue to fight for justice for our communities. This is an important win as it creates a path forward to provide permanent relief for immigrant communities.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I know I always had trouble with the budget reconciliation package as well, so thank you for the clarification. And now our next question is for all speakers. So the next question is, why should immigration reform be passed now? We can go in the order of Alondra, Veronica, and then Jeffrey.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So I think right now it's the best time to pass immigration reform. I think Anthony made a good point that it was one of the most inclusive ones we've had so far for a lot of our different undocumented communities. And we're moving away from a narrative that has only deemed some members of the community as worthy of citizenship to one where we're seeing that everybody deserves this right. And there is a sense of urgency that wasn't really there before, especially with the recent ruling for that deemed DACA unlawful. I think that initially the creation of DACA made people complacent and it gave everyone this false sense of security. So I think the recent ruling was a harsh reminder that any solution that does not lead to citizenship is only temporary.
Cool. Thank you so much, Alondra.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. It's lagging a little bit on my end, but I hope my audio is coming through clear. Okay. Well, I believe immigration reform should be passed now because, as Alondra mentioned, there was a really big sense of complacency, especially after the creation of DACA. But I think that at this moment, we're sort of in a moment that really resembles the atmosphere or the political climate that was around when DACA was initially created. And so with that in mind, I think that with our combined activism and making sure that we capitalize on the very slim majorities that the Democrats have in Congress, there is a sense of urgency that it really is now or never. And just the constant court rulings that threaten DACA recipients' lives or TPS holders' lives, there is a greater sense that this is the one shot that we have at passing immigration reform and passing immigration reform that covers as many people as possible. Even though there's obviously a lot of undocumented immigrants still left out, it is the greatest shot that we have.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for sharing. I 100% agree with that. The next question is going to be for Anthony. So Anthony, has the Texas court decision on DACA changed support for immigration reform?
Thanks so much for that question, Carlos. So the Texas court decision has only reinforced the need for a permanent solution for immigrant communities, especially for DACA recipients and undocumented youth, like Alondra had mentioned earlier. Coupled with the pandemic, we saw how much an integral role immigrants play in feeding, sustaining, and caring for the country. I think together, I believe that those events created an awareness within our elected officials and on how we can't recover from the pandemic without including the needs of immigrant communities. In this instance, that means providing a permanent solution and stability for immigrants. We must continue to raise our voices and on this issue because it's long overdue for a permanent solution that provides relief to immigrant communities.
For sure. Thank you, Anthony, for that response. And definitely, yeah, I think that it did show kind of like the need to pass it now, as you were saying, yes. And so the next question is going to be for our other panelists. So again, we're going to be going Alondra, Jeffrey, and then Veronica. So the next question is, how will it affect you if immigration reform is passed? And if it's not passed, how will it affect you and or your family?
Yeah, thank you. So to begin off, I really do think it would give me peace of mind as well as my family. I think since being able to understand what it meant to be undocumented and kind of the risks that we were being faced with every day, there is a constant fear and worry that when I leave my house or the next time I go back to campus, it is possibly the last time I see my family members. And while it's not an active thought throughout the day, I do think that it subconsciously drains me. And it is one of the main reasons why I got into organizing and why I'm an activist right now. So I think additionally, it would greatly facilitate my activism because I think we all know that there are certain risks being in this role while you're undocumented and there's still things that can impact you later on. So I think it would facilitate that as well. As far as like how it would affect me if it doesn't pass, I think there's just a lot more difficulties and barriers both in my academic and professional career moving forward, as well as knowing that my mom and my brother might never be able to retire because that is a benefit that comes with citizenship.
Cool. Thank you so much, Alondra, for sharing. And we can go ahead and move on to Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you. Well, for starters, I'm actually not on DACA. My initial application was sent in after the court ruling in New York last December and is now sitting frozen in USCIS because of the recent decision. And so it's obvious that, every chance that I get to have DACA, something always stops it. And so a permanent solution really is the only solution for myself. It is the only thing that's going to grant me any peace of mind from my own individual sense, whether that be from financial security and financial solvency and being able to access resources to be able to retain myself in higher education or just to be able to work. But then alongside Alondra, it really does provide a sense of security and a sense of home with regards to the safety of my family and my own safety, especially being involved in organizing spaces. Sometimes I think that I'm not only risking myself, but putting my other undocumented family members on the line because of my decision to be vocal about my status. And so, I guess passing this this bill, even if some of my family members wouldn't be served under it, really does just give my entire family a sense of security for those that do fall under the parameters of the bill, and does allow even those who aren't covered, a chance of being able to, legalize their situation and fix their status based on, whether that be family immigration or other laws that exist already out there. I think if it doesn't pass, it's going to be much of the same for me, continuing to live in fear, continuing to basically have to, count coins to be able to make sure that I can make tuition payments, housing payments to stay in college. But it also is just, another thing that I have to worry about subconsciously every day, knowing that, things that are available to my peers, things are as simple and as commonplace as going on trips, knowing that those are unavailable to me, it is also a source of psychological trauma and psychological alienation that I think a lot of people don't understand as a really important facet of passing this immigration bill.
Entonces, la pregunta que apenas hicimos es, para usted, Verónica, ¿cómo le afectaría si se aprueba la reforma migratoria? Si no se aprueba, ¿cómo le afectaría a usted y o a su familia?
Yo pienso que si no se aprueba, me afectaría más que nada, pues, en estar igual que ahora, sin un trabajo.
I believe
salir a la calle tranquila.
that if it's not approved, it would be like now, like not having a job, not being able to go outside safely. It would be worse than when we first came to this country. We would not be safe anywhere. We would not be able to support our children, to keep our families together. I would be very much affected if this were not approved. I believe that if it was approved, it would be better for us. We would be able to work, we would have a work permit, we would be able to work in better places, and we would have a good salary and be able to better support our families. And I believe that if it were approved, that would be ideal, because we could then be with our families and have a stable job, and that would be the best.
Muchas gracias, Verónica.
The next question is for Anthony. What setbacks do you anticipate for the budget reconciliation package, and what can community members do to combat this?
Thanks so much for that question, Blanca. Since we have to wait for the Senate parliamentarian to rule on the draft policy language, so the policy language has not been released. We expect it to be drafted by September 15th, from what I've heard from colleagues in DC and kind of what's been covered in the news. So it's helpful to continue to lift up the importance of a permanent solution for immigrant communities. We need to both lift up the human impact and the economic impact of it. As I mentioned, the budget reconciliation process really relies on the impact on the federal revenue and deficit. So we have to make that particular argument. That means that the argument you make when you meet with elected officials or when you share your stories in public or in the media, they need to include both of those components. So it's able to really fortify a stronger narrative, right? In this moment, we need to create a cohesive and strong pro-immigrant narrative. It's important in terms of moving forward the political momentum on this particular policy legislation, and to ensure that we're able to communicate the message effectively to both policymakers and our communities. In addition, we need to make sure that we're able to pull this through the finish line, right? I think a lot of the panelists had mentioned that a long-term solution has been coming for a while, but has not been delivered. So that means we need to continue to engage our elected officials, meaning senators and Congress members. That means showing strong public support and building momentum on this through marches, visibility events, calling your Congress members, doing phone banking, writing opinion op-eds, writing op-eds. And today's town hall is actually a great example of ways that folks can, one, raise visibility about the issue, engage the community, engage policymakers. And lastly, I want to say that immigration has become such a politicized and partisan issue, but it doesn't negate the fact that inaction isn't acceptable.
Thank you, Anthony, for sharing that. And our next question is for all speakers. What would the ideal immigration reform look like to you?
Thank you, Blanca, for the question. I think for me, initially, it would include a pathway to citizenship for all 11 million undocumented people, not just certain members of our community. I would definitely say that it would need to stop giving millions of dollars to border security and to organizations like ICE. Also, I would completely dismantle the current immigration system just because it's such a difficult and strenuous process to gain citizenship. And we know like up to 10 years people are taking in this waiting because there's such a huge backlog already. And so I think additionally, people need to understand that the current immigration system isn't necessarily broken. I think it's functioning the way it's meant to. It's meant to sustain an existence of an exploitable workforce, to continue building this economy and not giving these people rights. which is also why I think our worth is constantly correlated to the ways our labor has benefited the country and not simply for us being human beings.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I will echo all the thoughts that Alondra just shared. I think a lot of what she said, actually everything that she just said is, my ideal immigration reform bill. But I think I would also, tailor the bill to make sure to address needs that oftentimes aren't seen as something that immigrant communities need to be served with, whether that be specific food assistance programs that are tailored to the very specific needs of these communities, or even making sure that financial aid isn't tied to citizenship or the need to have a social security number, but also making sure that different processes, whether that be from opening a business or contracting your own services, are made simple and made accessible to immigrant communities. I think that would be other focuses of the bill that I think oftentimes are left out of the immigration conversation, but really need to be taken into account. I think we also need to provide a lot more support for immigrants throughout the immigration process, whether that be when they apply or throughout the process as they're waiting to hear back. I think there needs to be a lot of resources poured into psychological support given either through USCIS or through immigration services to make sure that these immigrants who are engaging in this system, whether that be a new system that's currently devised or the one that currently exists, I think that supporting immigrant psychological well-being would be very important. And I think that would be what I would include in an ideal immigration bill.
Verónica, ¿cómo sería para usted la reforma migratoria ideal?
Para mí la reforma
To me, the reform would be to give us a work permit, to give us residency, all of us. Then that way we could be more united with our families and we would be able to continue to help our families who are far away, the members of our family who are far away. We would be more safely in this country. We would be safer to go out on the street, to be able to share time and go out with our children safely. We would feel more secure personally.
Yeah.
Yes, that was all. Thank you.
Yo pienso que todos como inmigrantes es lo
I
que
believe that all of us as immigrants, that's what we want. We want the reform to pass so that all families can be together.
Muchas gracias por su respuesta. Una de las preguntas que no pudimos hacerle al principio es ¿por qué debería aprobarse ahora la reforma migratoria?
yo pienso
I believe that so that we can be here without fear of being deported, leaving my family alone, living separately, being unable to be with my children, unable to take them to school, to watch them grow up, to be aware and watching out for their studies, to be able to go out on the street without fear, to have a job where I can be at peace, and to help my family to be able to succeed in every aspect. If immigration reform is approved, then we would have that peace that would allow us to go out of our homes, to spend time with our children, to go find out how they're doing at school, to find out what did they learn that day, to share time with them on weekends, and to be more aware and alert to their needs. And if the reform were approved, that would be a relief to us in so many ways. We would be able to leave the country and visit our other family members.
Muchas gracias por compartir. So now, Anthony, we'll go back to you. So what does like the immigration reform look like? What does the ideal immigration reform look like to you?
Thanks so much for that question, Myra. I think aside from what we just discussed today on creating a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million, there's so much aspect of the immigration system that needs to be overhauled, like Jeffrey and Alondra had indicated earlier. A key aspect, in my opinion, is getting rid of the 1996 immigration law that created the problems we are seeing today. So a lot of the immigration enforcement, a lot of the criminalization of immigrant communities really stem from the 1996 laws. In addition, I think immigration policy can't be viewed and understood as a one-time fix. We must understand that migration is part of being human due to various factors such as political instability to climate displacement. And we're seeing that in this very moment where so many folks are fleeing their countries because of political instability or because the climate crisis that we're under in. We must be innovative in addressing immigration policy. We can't approach it in the same way, given that in the past we've seen how much it failed. And I think it's an opportunity right now to be innovative, look at different solutions, look at the system in a different way.
Thank you all for being here and sharing space with everyone present here today. Now we'll open it up to a few questions from the audience.
So the first two audience questions are directed towards Anthony. So Anthony, do we know the language for the immigration reform being drafted in the reconciliation budget? And how does this language bypass Senate parliamentarian rules? And could you list what is included in the 107 billion package mentioned?
Thanks for that question. So as I mentioned, we're still waiting for the draft language from the Senate staffing from judiciary. So we don't know exactly what's the language per se, but we know in terms of the framework, right? We've heard that DACA recipients, TPS holders, essential workers, and farm workers are the intended population to be included within the $107 million. And in terms of bypassing the Senate parliamentarian, it's really a wait and see game, right? They have to review the draft language, but I think there's multiple strategy to ensure that the parliamentarian, one, is educated about past precedents of using immigration in the budget reconciliation process. From my understanding, there was a use of this process in 2005 to increase a number of green cards within that process. And then in terms of the second question, what's included in the 107 billion package, it's DACA recipients, TPS holders, essential workers, and farm workers. But in terms of the broader $3.5 trillion, it's a lot of lists. I'm going to include a really great article so folks can see kind of what's the broader list on that.
So another question that we have here is there a timeline for this? When would we know anything for sure? What is the overall status right now?
So in terms of timeline, as I mentioned, we're waiting for the draft to be released. So I think that's sometime in September. If everything goes into plan, right, there's no roadblocks, I think folks are expecting a vote on the broader budget reconciliation process sometime in the fall. And I think right now is the key time to be active, to be lifting up your voices, connecting with your community partners and elected officials to make sure that this gets through the finish line. As I mentioned, right, our role as directly impacted folks or as the community is to hold our elected officials accountable in terms of when producing policy proposals that are meeting the needs of the community.
Thank you for sharing. So another question is, I'm a DACA recipient from Texas moving to Irvine to start a PhD program. I've always been involved in activism at my previous institutions. Where do I go to get involved as soon as I get to California?
I can answer this one. So we have undocumented student orgs at each campus, so you can always reach out to undocumented student orgs initially and your undocumented student program on each campus, as well as there is a UC-wide coalition of undocumented students moving forward with activism, and we kind of do the activism for system-wide decisions as opposed to just individually on our campuses, as well as the organizing team of the UC Cohort is publishing a report later this fall that will have all the resources and undocumented student orgs and programs on each campus that you can reach out to and get in contact for further information that isn't already included there.
Yeah, and I can actually add on a little bit to this, like do get in contact with like local nonprofits. They're a great way for you to just kind of get started, seeing where they're at, what type of campaigns they're pushing for. So definitely check them out, whether it's in Irvine and LA, it depends what your interest is. The next question we have here is, are any Dreamer Street demos planned before and for the reconciliation period?
So I think there's a lot of efforts nationwide. So one, galvanize support for just the process overall and just to ensure that it's a visible priority. So in California, there's going to be a bunch of marches and rallies sometime in September. So I would suggest you all to one, keep updated and subscribing to the DRC's newsletter and social media. We try to share events like that's happening within within the state of California that our partners are taking on. And another way to do that is to be engaged. If you're a student, I think it's be engaged in your local undocumented student organization, be engaged in your local community-based organization. I know there was a couple of folks that had mentioned one of our partners, Nakasek, who's doing phone banking specifically on this issue. So there's a lot of ways for you to get involved. And if there's no organization doing that, you have the power to actually put an event together, get your friends together, your colleagues to either do a rally, whatever event you want to do. And I think it's super important to continue the momentum.
Thank you. So the next question is, for those that couldn't be processed in DACA due to the most recent block, but meet the qualifications, how would they be included in this bill?
Thank you so much for that question. At this moment, we don't know the exact language, but we do know the general framework that is being discussed and included in the conversation. As I mentioned, DACA recipients, immigrant youth. So I think on the immigrant youth umbrella, that includes folks who are either qualified for DACA, but weren't able to submit an application. Again, we don't know the specificity of the language. Once the draft language comes out, we'll know more who qualifies. But at this point, it's just DACA recipients, immigrant youth, essential workers, and farm workers is the broader framework that we know.
Thank you. And definitely follow the Labor Center, the Dream Resource Center, and the UC Cohort, as we will be talking more about these issues and planning events so that we can all go out there and advocate for immigration reform. So I believe that is actually there's another question that just came up, and it is a question for Veronica. What is it like being a garment worker, and how will this program benefit your career?
Yo pienso que
Well,
para
I believe that somebody like me, who's been a garment worker for almost 30 years now, That is something that's going to be very, very difficult because we have to be working. Sometimes we're forced to work with no access to work permits. Sometimes you just get up with just to kind of eat. And if you take too long, you get reprimanded by the bosses. Garment workers, that work is very heavy work. It's very difficult. It's very heavy because we are not paid a fair wage. We're being paid the minimum, and they are forcing us, making us work many, many hours without a fair wage. Working in the garment industry is the most difficult thing there is in this country. There is a lot of discrimination. There is a lot of wage theft. It is the heaviest work and the worst paid. The garment worker is worse than being a slave. You're sitting for more than 8 to 10 hours a day. And we have to put up with it because we have no way of looking for a better job because we don't have work permits. That is why we have to put up with working in the garment industry. As my work in the garment industry has been a difficult experience. And this is why we have gone out to march so that we are paid and so that we are valued and paid fair wages. That, to me, is what it means to have been working in the garment industry for so many years.
Thank you for sharing. Our last question of today will also be for Veronica, and it is, how was it like working in the garment field during COVID? And what can we do to help the garment industry during this time?
Bueno, en este tiempo de la pandemia para mí fue demasiado difícil porque en los dos trabajos que yo estuve trabajando los cerraron.
This time during the pandemic has been very difficult because of the virus. Lots of people at work were, lots of the places where I work closed because so many people caught the virus. And I believe that so that this can get better, for this to improve, we need to be supported to have a fair wage. So that at the and also so that the factories get clean, so that the supervisors support us as we need to be supported and give us what we need to be able to work, so that we can get help and get support from the higher ups, so that they will look out for us and so that they can be considerate of us, the garment workers, so that we are not so badly discriminated against.
Muchas gracias por compartir eso. So we'll now be closing it up.
Thank you again, Veronica, for sharing with us. And thank you again for all the amazing questions and insightful questions. And thank you to our amazing panelists today for joining us. Can we get a virtual round of applause for our panelists? So now we'll be moving on to our closing speakers, which is Los Angeles Council Member Jill Cedillo and UC Representative Jimmy Gomez, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, but wanted to share a few words.
Dream Fellows, congratulations. This is the 10th summer of Dream Fellows, and it's the 10th summer for which you are the greatest hopes and aspirations of your parents. They're so proud of you. They look at you with great optimism, both for the decisions they made to come here, and for the decisions they make daily to support you. So congratulations, and know that whatever you do, that your family's going to be proud of all your accomplishments. And there are many accomplishments. I remember the first Dream Fellows when I was carrying legislation for the California Dream Act. They were critical in our efforts to make sure that the voice of the students of undocumented immigrants were heard in the city, in this state, and in this nation. And I also remember the efforts to fight for the driver's license bill, a bill that signed up over 1.7 million undocumented motorists. Your families who now have the freedom to go throughout this city, this state, and this nation with a California driver's license. No longer are your options of transportation limited by your legal status. And then finally, I look forward to what you're going to do to help us make sure that we pass DACA, that we pass a comprehensive immigration reform act, that we find a pathway towards legalization and citizenship for 11 million people, and that we make sure that this city and the state and this nation is as just as it claims to be. Now is the time for all Dream Fellows to make true the promise of democracy and realize the greatest hopes and aspirations their parents had, not for themselves, but for you in coming to this nation. So congratulations. You've got a great summer in front of you. Thank you for what you've done, but most importantly, thank you for what you will do for your families, for your communities, and for this station, for this great nation. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Even though council member Cedillo was unable to make it today, his words hold true. Now is the time to mobilize, whether it's with your host organization or with each other. This is a sentiment that Representative Jimmy Gomez would also like to share in a video he sent.
Hi, I'm Congressman Jimmy Gomez, and I represent the 34th Congressional District, the east side of Los Angeles, in the U.S. House of Representatives. I want to thank the UCLA Labor Center for inviting me to participate and address the fellows of the Dream Summer of 2021. My father, mother, and 4 of my siblings immigrated to this country from Mexico in the late 60s and early 70s. And they were undocumented, and they had struggles just like a lot of you and a lot of the people in our community. That is why I fight so hard to make sure that our community, our immigrant community, is represented at every level of government. We know that if you're provided the opportunities to succeed, you will, and you go beyond our expectations. But what we need is for you to continuously be involved, to help us shape legislation like the Dream and Promise Act, to help us create a more humane immigration system, because it is your voices that will add that personal narrative of why it's so important to continue to bring immigrants to this country. So keep up the fight. Thank you for being involved. And remember, you have an ally in me in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Like Representative Jimmy Gomez said, we need to continuously be involved throughout the budget reconciliation process and organize to demand immigration reform now. Currently, there are a number of moderate Democrats throughout the country who are threatening to derail the budget's passage in Congress. Join the movement now by calling, emailing, and even organizing sit-ins at the offices of these key players. We have created a toolkit with the contact information of these legislators and templatized calls and emails for those interested. The time to fight is now. Immigration reform now.